Good morning. Today we will finish chapter 9. We'll look at chapter 9, verse 23 through chapter 10, verse 18 of the book of Hebrews as we read through. So verse 23 of chapter 9 says, "Thus it was necessary for the sketches of heavenly things to be purified with these rites." So he's talking about Jesus' sacrifice. He's talking about the blood that Jesus shed. And because they need to have better things than the human sacrifices. You know, the high priest would go, once a year, the high priest would go and do the blood offering behind the curtain. The other priests would do, offerings and stuff, on a regular basis. But, these offerings, they had to continually do them. And, in chapter 10, verse 2, it says the same sacrifices that are continually offered year after year, to make perfect of those who approach. But those sacrifices couldn't make us pure because they were done over and over, and our conscience was never cleared of sin. If the sacrifice was complete, and this is even, we go to Holy Communion and we hear, the sins are forgiven in the body and blood of Christ. And we do that on a regular basis because we know that we continue to sin and we are conscious of our sins. We know, but we confess our sins known and unknown, things we have done and things we have left undone, so we know some of our sins, but we don't know all of them. Yeah, I'm going to go back now to chapter 24 of verse 9. "Christ did not enter a sanctuary made by human hands, a copy of the true one, but he entered into heaven itself to appear in the presence of God on our behalf." And it wasn't to offer himself again and again. The high priest, every year, there were continual sacrifices here on earth. For Jesus, the sacrifice was once for all time. Jesus doesn't have to die every day for us. He doesn't have to die once a year or once every 20 years. One time was enough. He said, verse 25, "Nor was it to offer himself again and again as the high priests, because then he would have to suffer it again and again. But as it appears, he appeared once for all." And so this is, Jesus' sacrifice, one time for all of us, for all time. And our sins are taken care of. In verse 27 says, "Just as it is appointed for mortals to die once, and after that to judgment, so Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are waiting for him," to save those who are faithful in him, to save those and bring them to that place of eternity. Chapter 10, verse 4, "It is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sin. Consequently, when Christ came into the world, he said," and he quotes from Psalms, "Sacrifices and offerings you have not desired, body you prepared for me, of burnt offerings I take no pleasure." And then Jesus said, "I have come to do your will, God." And it's just that reminder that, anything and everything we do, falls short of what God would require of us. And, the requirement of us would be perfect, that we would be perfect, that we would not sin. And boy, I know that's not possible. It's just, there's no way because, we are separated from God by this human nature, this sinful condition that's within us. We talk about it as just being that inborn sin that's within us. It's just, there isn't anything we can do about it. That we have that propensity that we're going to sin, no matter how hard we try. We may not have major sins, but we sin each and every day. It's there and it's a part of who we are. And, when you think about, just an infant, a baby that's a day old, has that baby sinned? Well, possibly not. We really can't think or act or do or not do. But yet, we know that in time, it'll happen. And so the sacrifice is there so that so that this sinful nature that we have, that, I mean, that we can't get away from, is forgiven by God through Jesus Christ. Verse 10 of chapter 10 says, "It is by God's will that we have been sanctified through the offering of the body of Christ for once for all." We've been sanctified. We've been set apart from our sins. We've been made holy. I mean, that's, and sometimes when I read this, like sanctified or justified, I remember, quite a few years ago when I first started taking seminary classes and doing some church work, preaching and stuff. I was talking with my mother, and she said, "Oh, you're starting to use church words," and I go, "What?" Well, she's talking, fellowship and forgiveness and sanctified, and but, and there are some of those words that we hear more in church or in relationship to our relationship to God than any other time. I mean, I don't think of myself as sanctified to someone else. Justified, I mean, that's another word that is kind of a word we hear in church. We've been justified, by Jesus Christ, but we also justify the bottom line on our accounts and different. We justify a lot of things that way. But there are words that sometimes you hear them, and it's just, we've been sanctified. We've been set apart from our sins. We've been purified and made holy. And sometimes it'd be easier just to say you've been purified by Jesus' sacrifice than sanctified, because sometimes it's just a little bit of a mysterious type word in some of those that way. Going on just a little bit, verse 14, again, this writer reminds us, "For by a single offering, he, Jesus, has perfected for all time those who are sanctified." So he has perfected us, those of us who have been set apart from our sin. And so we've been set apart for our sin forever. I mean, we're going to sin again. There is no question about that. But when we come and we ask that forgiveness, and we say, we just messed up and we need your forgiveness, God. That single offering that Jesus made continues to set us apart from those sins that we have. And then again, now we verse 16 and on, I mean, we go back to that quotation from Jeremiah 31, verses 31 to 34. And it's just, I mean, so this is the second time here in the book of Hebrews that we've seen these words. This is the covenant I will make with them, says the Lord. I will put my law in their hearts, and I will write them on their minds. And I will remember their sins no more. And then the last verse we look at today, where there is forgiveness of sins, there is no longer an offering for sins. So when we trust and accept that our sins are forgiven in Jesus Christ, we no longer have to follow the Jewish rituals of, the sacrificing of the animals or the sacrificing of this and that or whatever it is. We don't have to, I mean, there isn't anything that I can do on my own that will set me apart from my sins. There isn't anything that I can do on my own that will grant that forgiveness of sins other than to ask through Jesus Christ, my Lord, and to know that forgiveness, salvation comes through him. And so I think that's something that sometimes gets missed, is that, where there is forgiveness of these sins, there is no longer any need of offering for sin. And it's probably not so prevalent in our areas, but there are other places that will promote, some offerings or donations or whatever to help pay for your sins. I want to go back just a little bit here to verse 9 of chapter 10, where there's a quotation, "See, I have come to do your will," end quote. That's Jesus speaking. And then the writer says he abolishes the first in order to establish the second. He abolishes the first sacrificial laws and those rituals to establish that second ritual of forgiveness that comes through his death and resurrection. And it's, we no longer have to do those sin offerings. And he's not abolishing the law, because back in Matthew chapter 5 is one of the places in verse 17, Jesus says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish, but to fulfill." And this is important to remember, that the laws are still there for us, for our benefit, to point us to our need of this Savior, Jesus Christ, who offered himself for us one time, once for all.